At 8:15 in the morning on a gray Thursday in April, Garrett Holloway walked through the doors of Riverbend Emergency Veterinary Clinic, carrying his entire world in his arms. The German Shepherd trembled against his chest. Each shallow breath rattled through Remington's body like wind through broken shutters. The dog's eyes, once sharp and fearless, had dulled to something Garrett had never seen before. Something that looked like surrender. "Stay with me, Remy," Garrett whispered, his voice breaking on the second word. "Just stay with me." The automatic doors hissed shut behind them. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The smell of antiseptic and fear hung thick in the air. A young receptionist looked up from her desk, saw the officer's face, saw the dog barely breathing, and immediately reached for the phone. "Dr. Whitmore," she said, her professional composure cracking. "He's here." Garrett barely registered her words. His entire focus narrowed to the rise and fall of Remy's chest. Too shallow, too slow. Each breath felt like it might be the last. The dog had been fine yesterday morning, fine when they'd finished their shift, fine when Garrett had poured kibble into the metal bowl by the kitchen door. But at 3 in the morning, Garrett had woken to the sound of retching. He'd found Remy collapsed on the bathroom tile, vomit streaked with blood, body convulsing. The drive to the clinic had taken 12 minutes. Garrett had run 4 red lights. He couldn't remember a single one. "Officer Holloway." Dr. Evelyn Whitmore appeared in the hallway, her gray hair pulled back, her expression controlled, but her eyes betraying concern. She'd been a veterinarian for 23 years. She'd seen this look before, the look of someone preparing to say goodbye. "Bring him to exam 3. Garrett followed her down the corridor. His boots echoed on linoleum. Remy's head lolled against his shoulder. The dog's breathing hitch stuttered, resumed. Each irregularity sent ice through Garrett's veins. The exam room was small and too bright. A steel table occupied the center. Medical equipment lined the walls. Dr. Whitmore gestured to the table, and Garrett lowered Remy onto the cold surface as gently as he'd once laid his infant daughter in her crib 30 years ago, in what felt like another lifetime. Remy whimpered. The sound cut straight through Garrett's chest. "Tell me what happened," Dr. Whitmore said, already running her hands over Remy's body, checking gums, feeling for abnormalities. "He was fine yesterday. Normal. Then at 3 this morning, I heard him throwing up. Blood in it. He couldn't stand. Couldn't even lift his head." Dr. Whitmore's fingers probed along Remy's abdomen. The dog flinched. She moved to his chest, listening with her stethoscope. Her brow furrowed. "Heart rate is erratic. Breathing is labored. Gums are pale." She looked up. "I need to run blood work immediately. This could be organ failure, poisoning, internal bleeding." "Has he eaten anything unusual? Been exposed to chemicals?" "No, nothing. He was with me the entire day yesterday. Standard patrol, nothing out of the ordinary." Dr. Whitmore nodded, already preparing a syringe for blood draw. "I'll get these samples to the lab. It'll take about 20 minutes for preliminary results." 20 minutes felt like forever. Garrett pulled a chair close to the table and sat. He placed his hand on Remy's side, feeling the shallow rise and fall of each breath. The dog's eyes found his. In 8 years, Garrett had learned to read every expression in that intelligent face. Right now he saw pain, confusion, and something that looked like an apology. "Don't," Garrett whispered, "don't you dare apologize to me." The minutes crawled. Dr. Whitmore returned twice to check vitals. Each time she said nothing, but her expression grew more grave. At the 15-minute mark, Captain Thornton arrived. He stood in the doorway, uniform, crisp, face weathered, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. He simply stood there. A presence. A witness. Officer Dalton came 5 minutes later. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. Dalton had worked with Remy for 6 years. He'd seen the dog take down armed suspects. He'd seen Remy locate missing children in impossible conditions. The big man looked like he might cry. When Dr. Whitmore finally returned with the lab results, her face told Garrett everything before she opened her mouth. "Sit down," she said gently. "I'm already sitting." "Then brace yourself." She placed the printout on the table. "His liver enzymes are elevated. Kidney function is severely compromised. Red blood cell count is dropping. These numbers indicate multi-organ failure. The words landed like punches. Garrett's hand tightened on Remy's fur. What caused it? That's what I can't tell you. There's no toxin in his blood, no infection markers, no masses on the preliminary exam. His organs are simply shutting down, and I don't know why. There has to be something, a treatment, anything. Dr. Whitmore's eyes held a sadness Garrett recognized. He'd seen it before 8 years ago in the oncologist's office when they delivered Amanda's final prognosis. Officer Holloway, Garrett, she gentled her voice. With numbers like these, we're looking at end-stage organ failure. I can make him comfortable. I can give him pain medication, but I can't reverse this. His body is shutting down. The room tilted. Garrett forced himself to breathe. How long? Hours, maybe less. Captain Thornton shifted in the doorway. Dalton turned away, at shoulders shaking. Garrett looked down at Remy. The dog's eyes were still on him. Still trusting, still loyal, still everything a dog should be. No, Garrett heard himself say. No, you run more tests. There's something we're missing. Garrett, I understand this is difficult, but run them again. Check for everything. I don't care what it costs. Dr. Whitmore studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll run a comprehensive panel, but Garrett, you need to prepare yourself. These numbers don't lie. She left to prepare more tests. The three men remained in the small room with the dying dog. No one spoke. The only sound was Remy's labored breathing and the tick of the wall clock. Garrett's mind refused the present. It fled backwards, seeking escape in memory. 8 years ago, on a September morning that had felt like the end of everything, Garrett Holloway had stood in the hospital parking lot and contemplated driving his truck into the river. Amanda had been gone for 3 weeks. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosis to death in 7 months. She'd been 49 years old. They'd been married for 18 years. She was supposed to grow old with him. They were supposed to retire to that cabin in Montana they'd talked about. They were supposed to have more time. The grief was a physical thing. It lived in his chest like a stone. It made breathing difficult. It made getting out of bed nearly impossible. It made the idea of continuing to exist feel pointless. He'd taken a leave of absence from the police department. Captain Thornton had insisted. Take all the time you need, he'd said. But what Garrett needed was Amanda, and time wouldn't bring her back. On that September morning, Garrett had been sitting in his truck, keys in the ignition, seriously considering whether anyone would miss him when his phone had rung. Holloway, it's Sergeant Brandt from K-9 Division. I heard about your wife. I'm sorry. Thanks. Listen, I've got a situation. We've got a shepherd, about 6 months old, found abandoned in a drainage ditch 3 weeks ago. We've been trying to place him, but he's got issues. Doesn't trust people. Won't eat consistently. The handler we assigned him to returned him yesterday, said he's untrainable. We're about to send him to a regular shelter, which with his behavioral problems probably means euthanasia. Garrett said nothing. I know the timing is terrible, Brandt continued. But I remembered you mentioning once that you grew up with German shepherds. Thought maybe if you had the time you could foster him. Just until we find someone else. It'd only be temporary. Garrett should have said no, he could barely take care of himself. But something in Brandt's voice, some thread of desperation for this unwanted dog, made him hear himself say, send me the address. The shelter was on the east side of town. Gray concrete building. Chain-link kennels. The sound of barking echoed off every surface. Brandt met him at the entrance, looking relieved. He's in the back. Fair warning, he's not friendly. Don't take it personally. The kennel was in the isolation section, away from the other dogs. Inside, pressed against the far corner, was a German Shepherd puppy who looked like he'd already given up on the world. His coat was matted. His ribs showed. There was a scar across his muzzle, partially healed, origin unknown. But it was his eyes that struck Garrett. They held the same look Garrett saw in the mirror every morning. The look of someone who'd lost everything and couldn't figure out why they were still here. His name's Remington, Brant said. Previous owner surrendered him with that name. We've been calling him Ramey. Garrett approached the kennel slowly. The puppy didn't move, didn't growl, just watched with those defeated eyes. Hey, Remy, Garrett said quietly. The puppy's ear twitched. Nothing else. Garrett opened the kennel door and stepped inside. Brant tensed behind him. Careful. He bit the last handler who tried that. But Remy didn't bite. He didn't move at all. Garrett lowered himself to the concrete floor back against the wall 6 feet from the dog. He sat there in silence. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Maybe this was a bad idea, Brant finally said. Give us a minute. 20 minutes in, Garrett started talking. Not to the dog specifically, just talking. About Amanda. About how she used to make these terrible blueberry pancakes every Sunday, burned on the outside, raw in the middle. And how he'd eaten every one and told her they were perfect. About how the house felt too big now, too quiet. About how he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do with all the years stretching ahead. Somewhere around the 30-minute mark, Remy's head lifted slightly. At 40 minutes, the puppy took 3 cautious steps forward. At 50 minutes, Remy crossed the remaining distance and lowered his head onto Garrett's knee. Garrett's hand moved of its own accord, settling on the dog's neck. Remy flinched but didn't pull away. They sat like that, man and dog, both broken, both alone, both unsure why they were still breathing. I'll take him, Garrett said. That night, Garrett brought Remy home to the empty house. The puppy explored cautiously, sniffing corners, checking rooms. He found Amanda's closet where her clothes still hung and sat down in front of it. Just sat there. Garrett understood. He often stood in that doorway too. For the first 3 weeks, Remy barely ate. He flinched at sudden movements. He didn't play. He didn't wag his tail. He existed barely in the same way Garrett did. But slowly, incrementally, something shifted. Remy started sleeping at the foot of Garrett's bed, started eating more consistently, started following Garrett from room to room, a quiet shadow. And one morning when Garrett woke up after a nightmare about Amanda's final days, he found Remy's head resting on the bed next to him, brown eyes watchful and steady. You too, huh? Garrett had whispered. Remy's tail had thumped once against the floor. That was the beginning. Garrett returned to work 3 months later. He enrolled Remy in basic canine training. The instructors were skeptical. The dog was skittish, unpredictable, clearly traumatized. But Garrett saw something else. He saw intelligence. He saw potential. He saw a creature fighting to survive just like him. The training was brutal. Remy struggled with commands. He balked at obstacles. He refused to engage with other dogs. But Garrett didn't give up. Every evening they practiced. Every weekend they drilled. And slowly, painfully, Remy began to trust. 6 months into training, something clicked. Remy started anticipating commands, started showing the drive and focus of a working dog, started becoming the partner Garrett hadn't known he needed. They graduated from the K9 Academy on a March morning. Remy wore his new vest with pride. Garrett felt for the first time since Amanda's death like maybe he had a purpose again. Their first real call came 2 months later. A warehouse fire on the industrial edge of town. Chemical plant, 3 workers unaccounted for, smoke thick enough to choke on. Garrett and Remy arrived with the second wave of responders. The fire chief was shouting coordinates. Firefighters were suiting up. The building groaned and sparked flames eating through the roof. We've got thermal signatures on the 2nd floor, the chief yelled, but the stairs are compromised. We can't get to them. Remy can, Garrett said. The chief looked at the EG, then at Garrett. That's a death trap in there. He can do it. They geared up. Protective vest for Remy, breathing apparatus for both of them. At the entrance, Garrett knelt and gripped Remy's face. Find them, buddy. Find them and bring us to them. Remy's eyes locked on his. One sharp bark. Ready. They entered hell. The heat was immediate and overwhelming. Flames crawled up walls. Smoke obscured everything beyond 3 feet. Remy's nose went down, working filtering through the chaos of burning chemicals and melting plastic in fear. He moved with purpose. Garrett followed one hand on the dog's vest, trusting completely. They navigated around collapsed beams over debris through sections where the floor felt dangerously unstable. Remy stopped at a blocked doorway, barked twice. Garrett called out. A weak voice responded from the other side. It took 10 minutes to clear the debris. Two workers huddled inside, overcome by smoke. Garrett radioed their position. Firefighters arrived within minutes, hauled the workers out. One more, the chief's voice crackled through the radio. Thermal signature, northeast corner, second floor. But you need to get out. Structure's failing. Garrett looked at Remy. The dog was already moving northeast. They found the third worker pinned under a collapsed shelving unit, unconscious, barely breathing. Garrett tried to lift the metal, but it was too heavy, too hot. Behind them, a support beam groaned. The ceiling sagged. We need to go, Garrett said to Remy. Now. But Remy wouldn't leave. The dog positioned himself at the worker's side and barked sharp and insistent, calling for help, refusing to abandon someone in need. Garrett radioed again. Two firefighters appeared through the smoke, helped lift the shelving. They dragged the worker toward the exit. The building screamed around them, metal twisting, concrete cracking. They were 20 feet from the exit when the floor gave way. Garrett fell. His hand lost contact with Remy's vest. He hit the ground floor hard, breath knocked from his lungs, vision swimming. Debris rained down. Fire surrounded him. He tried to stand, couldn't. Tried to breathe, couldn't. Through the smoke and confusion, he heard barking, fierce, determined, getting closer. Then teeth gripped his vest collar, pulling, dragging. Remy somehow having followed him down through the collapse, now hauling him toward daylight with everything he had. Garrett tried to help, tried to move his legs, but his body wasn't cooperating. Remy kept pulling, inch by inch. The dog's paws slipped on debris. His breathing came in desperate gasps, but he didn't stop. They tumbled out into open air as the building's second floor collapsed entirely behind them. Garrett lay on the ground, coughing, disoriented. Paramedics swarmed. Someone was checking his vitals. Someone else was putting an oxygen mask on his face. But Garrett's eyes found Remy. The dog stood 10 feet away, flanks heaving, covered in ash, staring at Garrett with an intensity that communicated everything without words. I've got you. I'll always have you. Later at the hospital, they told Garrett he'd cracked 2 ribs and had minor burns. They told him he was lucky to be alive. They told him his dog was a hero. Garrett already knew that. When he finally made it home, 36 hours later, Remy was waiting on the front porch. Someone from the department had dropped him off. The dog's paws were wrapped in bandages. The vet had treated burns on his paw pads. Garrett sat down on the porch steps. Remy limped over and settled beside him, careful of his injuries. You saved my life, Garrett said quietly. Remy leaned his head against Garrett's shoulder. From that moment, they were inseparable. Not just partners, brothers. The years that followed brought more calls, more rescues, more moments when Remy's nose or courage or sheer determination made the difference between life and death. In the summer of 2021, they found Lily McCormick, 7 years old, abducted from her front yard by a man with a record and a grudge against the girl's father. The Amber Alert had gone out at noon. By 3 in the afternoon, every cop in the county was searching. Remy picked up the scent at a rest stop 15 miles from the abduction site. He tracked it through woods across a stream to an abandoned hunting cabin deep in state forest. The man was inside. He had a knife. He had Lily bound in a corner. And when he saw Garrett and Remy approach, he made his choice. He came out swinging. The pipe caught Remy across the ribs. The dog yelped, went down hard. The man raised the pipe for another strike. Garrett tackled him. They went down together, and in the chaos, Remy got back up. The dog was limping, clearly hurt. But he positioned himself between Garrett and the attacker. Teeth bared a low growl rumbling from his chest that promised violence if the man moved wrong. The man surrendered. Lily McCormick went home to her family. Remy got 17 stitches and a week of pain medication. Garrett added another memory to the collection of times his partner had taken a hit meant for him. But it was the incident in October 2024 that would change everything, though neither of them knew it at the time. A tip had come in about a gun-running operation working out of the commercial docks. Garrett and Remy were part of the response team. 3 suspects, warehouse full of illegal weapons, standard operation that turned complicated fast. They'd split up to cover more ground. Garrett took the east entrance. Remy ranged ahead, nose working alert for any sign of the suspects. The rain had started around midnight, turning the dock area slick and treacherous. Visibility was poor. The warehouse loomed dark against darker sky. Remy stopped suddenly, hackles raised. Garrett drew his weapon. 2 men burst from a side door. One ran left, one ran right. Garrett went right, following protocol, trusting backup to get the other. Remy bolted ahead faster, cutting off the suspect's escape route. The man spun, raised his hands. "Don't shoot!" Garrett approached weapon trained. "On the ground now." The man dropped. Garrett was 3 steps away when the shot rang out. It echoed across the dock, sharp and unmistakable. A .45 caliber. Garrett knew the sound. He spun, looking for the shooter, but saw nothing. The suspect on the ground wasn't armed. The shot had come from somewhere else, somewhere in the darkness. Remy yelped, a short, sharp sound, then shook his head hard like clearing water from his ears. "Remy, heel." The dog trotted back, and they secured the suspect together. Backup arrived 90 seconds later. They swept the warehouse, found the second suspect hiding in a storage container, recovered 24 illegal firearms. Clean operation. Successful night. Back at the station, Garrett checked Remy over. The dog seemed fine. No blood, no limping, no obvious injuries. When Garrett ran his hands over Remy's coat, feeling for wounds, the dog stood patiently, tail wagging slightly. "You're okay, boy." Remy licked his hand. Garrett assumed the yelp had been surprised at the gunshot. Dogs had sensitive ears. Made sense. He never found an entry wound. The bullet had entered through the thick fur at Remy's side, penetrated between the ribs, and lodged near his heart without leaving an obvious external injury. No blood trail, no visible hole. And Remy, with the stoicism of working dogs everywhere, had simply absorbed the pain and kept going. Because that's what he did. That's who he was. For 18 months, the bullet fragment had lived inside him, slowly migrating, slowly poisoning, slowly killing him, while he continued to work, continued to serve, continued to protect Garrett, without ever showing the agony he must have felt. Now in the exam room at Riverbend Emergency Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Whitmore returned with more test results. Her face was grave. "The comprehensive panel confirms it. Multi-organ failure. Garrett, there's nothing more I can do. We need to talk about making him comfortable." Garrett's world narrowed to a pinpoint. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's time. His body is shutting down. He's in pain. The humane thing." "No." "Garrett," I said no. Dr. Whitmore's expression held compassion and sadness in equal measure. "I know this is impossible. I know you love him, but keeping him alive now is only prolonging his suffering." Captain Thornton stepped forward. "Garrett, she's right. I know it's hard, but you don't know anything." Garrett's voice came out harsh. "He's not just a do. He's my partner. He's my family. He's the reason I'm still alive. Which is exactly why you need to let him go," Dr. Whitmore said gently. "He's served you faithfully. He's fought his whole life. Now he needs you to release him from this fight." Garrett looked at Remy. The dog's breathing had grown more labored. His eyes were half closed. But when Garrett's hand touched his head, those eyes opened and found his face. Trust, love, loyalty, everything Garrett didn't deserve and had been given anyway. "If I do this," Garrett's voice broke, "if I let him go, I need time. I need to say goodbye." Dr. Whitmore nodded. "Take all the time you need. I'll prepare the medication and give you privacy." She left the room. Captain Thornton and Officer Dalton followed, closing the door behind them. Garrett was alone with Remy. He pulled his chair closer to the exam table, put both hands on the dog's side, feeling the too rapid heartbeat, the too shallow breathing. "I don't know how to do this," Garrett whispered. "I don't know how to let you go." Remy's tail moved slightly, just the tip, a tiny gesture that said, "I'm here, I'm still here. You saved me, buddy. That day at the shelter, you saved me. Every day since you have saved me. The fire, the rescues, all those nights when I missed Amanda so much I could barely breathe, you were there. You never gave up on me. Not once." His voice caught. Tears he'd been holding back spilled over. "I should have seen it. Should have known something was wrong. You were hurting, and I was too stupid, too selfish, too caught up in my own life to notice. I'm so sorry." Remy shifted on the table. With what must have been tremendous effort, the dog lifted his head just enough to rest it in Garrett's lap. The gesture broke something in Garrett. A sound escaped him, half sob, half broken prayer. He gathered Remy as carefully as he could, mindful of the pain, and held the dog against his chest. "I love you," Garrett whispered into the dog's fur. "I love you so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for being here when no one else was. Thank you for choosing me." Remy's breathing hitched. His body trembled. The door opened softly. Dr. Whitmore entered carrying a small tray with a syringe. She set it on the counter without speaking. "It's 2 injections," she explained quietly. "The first is a sedative. It'll make him sleep. The second stops his heart. He won't feel any pain. He'll just drift off." Garrett couldn't speak, could only nod. "Whenever you're ready." She stepped back, giving them space. Garrett held Remy tighter. The dog's heart beat against his palm, irregular, failing, but still beating, still fighting. "It's okay, buddy," Garrett managed. "It's okay, you can rest now. You've done your duty. You've been the best partner, the best friend anyone could ask for. If this is your time, I'm here. I'm right here. You won't be alone." He pressed his forehead to Remy's, closed his eyes, tried to memorize everything. The weight of him, the warmth, the smell of dog and shampoo, and the faint scent of the outdoors that always clung to working canines. Dr. Whitmore approached with the first syringe. "This will just take a moment." But as she reached for Remy's leg to find the veins, something happened. Remy's body jerked, not a gentle movement, a spasm, sharp and sudden. Garrett's eyes snapped open. "What was that?" "Sometimes there are muscle spasms as the body begins to—" Remy jerked again, harder. His breathing changed, not slower, different. His paw kicked out involuntarily. Dr. Whitmore frowned. She set the syringe down and placed her stethoscope against Remy's chest. Her frown deepened. "That's strange." "What?" "His heart rate just spiked. That's not consistent with end-stage organ failure." She moved her hands along Remy's side. When she pressed near his rib cage, the dog yelped, a sharp pain sound that made Garrett's stomach drop. "That's a pain response, acute and localized." Dr. Whitmore's expression shifted from resignation to focused concern. "This isn't matching the presentation. What does that mean?" Before she could answer, the door opened and a man in scrubs walked in. Tall, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of someone who'd spent decades in operating rooms. "Evelyn, I heard you might need a second opinion on a difficult case," he said. Then his eyes took in the scene. The dying dog, the devastated officer, the prepared euthanasia drugs. "I'm Dr. Marcus Sinclair. I'm here consulting on surgical techniques. Do you mind if I take a look?" Dr. Whitmore gestured him forward. "At this point, I'll take any insight you can offer." Dr. Sinclair approached Remy with calm efficiency. His hands moved over the dog's body, pressing gently, watching for reactions. When he reached the same spot Dr. Whitmore had found, Remy flinched violently. "There." Dr. Sinclair's eyes sharpened. "That's not systemic failure. That's focal trauma. Something is causing acute pain in this specific location." "But the blood work—" Shows the results of the trauma, not the cause. He looked at Garrett. When did the symptoms start? This morning, 3 a.m. And before that, any signs lethargy, loss of appetite, changes in behavior. Garrett's mind raced. He's been slower the last few months. I thought he was just getting older. He's 8. What about 18 months ago? Any incidents, any injuries? Garrett's breath caught. There was a call, gun runners at the docks. There was a shot fired. Remy yelped, but I checked him. There was no blood, no wound. Dr. Sinclair and Dr. Whitmore exchanged a look. We need x-rays, Dr. Sinclair said, right now. Hope was a dangerous thing. Garrett had learned that lesson when Amanda died. Hope could destroy you when it was taken away. But as he watched Dr. Sinclair and Dr. Whitmore prepare the portable x-ray machine, Garrett felt it anyway. A small, fragile ember in the darkness. Maybe there was still time. Maybe there was still a chance. Maybe Remy wasn't dying from age or disease. Maybe there was something they could fix. Dr. Whitmore dimmed the overhead lights. The exam room took on a different quality. Shadows pulled in corners. The blue glow from the computer monitor cast strange angles across everyone's faces. We'll need 3 angles, Dr. Sinclair said, adjusting the portable x-ray machine's arm with practiced precision. Lateral, ventrodorsal, and oblique. If there's something inside causing this presentation, these images will show it. Garrett stood pressed against the far wall, arms wrapped tight across his chest. Remy lay motionless on the steel table, too weak now to even raise his head. The dog's breathing had become so shallow it was barely visible. The first flash came without warning. Bright white light flooded the room for a fraction of a second. Remy flinched at the intensity, but didn't cry out. Garrett's fingers dug into his biceps hard enough to leave marks. Dr. Sinclair moved the machine with the efficiency of someone who'd performed this procedure thousands of times, calculating angles, positioning the plate beneath Remy's body. His movements were precise, methodical, almost mechanical in their consistency. Second flash. Third. Each one a frozen moment captured in radiation and desperate hope. Give me 90 seconds to process these, Dr. Whitmore said, already moving to the computer station. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The monitor flickered, loading, thinking. Those 90 seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Garrett stared at Remy. The dog's eyes were closed now. His chest barely moved. The trembling that had started earlier had worsened, small shudders running through his entire frame like aftershocks from an earthquake. Hold on, Garrett whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to Remy or himself. Just hold on a little longer. Captain Thornton shifted his weight in the doorway. The big man's jaw was set, his eyes fixed on some point on the far wall. Officer Dalton had his arms crossed so tight his knuckles had gone white. The computer chimed. Images are up, Dr. Whitmore said, her voice carefully neutral. Everyone moved at once, converging on the monitor. Garrett got there last, afraid to look. Afraid not to look, afraid of what 90 seconds of processing time might reveal. The screen showed the internal landscape of Remy's chest cavity. Ribs appeared as pale arches against darker tissue, the shadow of lungs, the denser mass of the heart. Normal anatomy rendered in shades of gray and white. Dr. Sinclair leaned in, his eyes scanning methodically from top to bottom, left to right, searching. Then he stopped. His finger rose slowly to point at something on the screen, something that didn't belong. There, he said quietly. The single word carried the weight of revelation. At first, Garrett couldn't see it, just gray shapes and darker shadows, the normal chaos of internal organs viewed through radiation. Then Dr. Whitmore adjusted the contrast and brightness, and it appeared. A small, bright spot, perfectly white against the grayscale background. Metallic, foreign, impossibly wrong. Approximately 3 centimeters long, irregular edges like a piece of shrapnel. Lodged between the 5th and 6th rib on the right side, pressed dangerously close to the pericardium, the protective membrane surrounding the heart. That's a bullet fragment, Dr. Sinclair said. His voice held the careful neutrality of a surgeon delivering news that could tip either toward catastrophe or salvation. 45 caliber based on the density and morphology, and it's been there a considerable time. Garrett's world tilted sideways. The floor felt unstable beneath his feet. How long? Dr. Sinclair zoomed in on the image, the fragment growing larger on screen. He pointed to a thin white line surrounding the foreign object. See this halo effect? That's scar tissue. The body's been attempting to encapsulate the fragment, wall it off. Based on the degree of tissue formation, I'd estimate this object has been in place for 18 to 24 months, possibly longer. 18 months. October 2024. The docks, the rain, the gunshot that echoed across the water. Remy's sharp yelp. "Oh, God!" Garrett breathed, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He was shot. He was actually shot that night, and I never knew. Dr. Whitmore pulled up the lateral view, a different angle of the same terrible truth. The fragment appeared again this time, showing its proximity to vital structures with even greater clarity. It sat millimeters from the heart, millimeters from instant death. The fragment has been migrating. Dr. Sinclair continued, his finger tracing an invisible path on the screen. Very slowly, approximately 2 millimeters per month based on the tissue response patterns. Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement has been gradually pushing it closer to critical structures. Now it's causing pericardial inflammation, fluid accumulation around the heart. The pressure from that fluid buildup is what's causing the cascade organ failure we're seeing in his blood work. But if we remove it, Garrett started, hope flaring, painful and bright. If we remove it successfully, Dr. Sinclair interrupted, his tone measured, and if we can extract it without the fragment puncturing anything vital during the procedure, then yes, his organs should recover. The failure is secondary to the pressure, not primary disease. Remove the source, eliminate the pressure, the organs bounce back. He turned to face Garrett directly, and the expression in his eyes was one Garrett had seen before. In the faces of doctors delivering impossible choices. In the eyes of chaplains visiting hospital rooms. In mirrors reflecting moments when hope and despair stood balanced on a knife's edge. But I need you to understand what we're dealing with here, Officer Holloway. This fragment is sitting against the pericardium. The membrane is thin, delicate. One wrong movement during extraction, one miscalculation, and we could cause a catastrophic tear. If that happens, he'll exsanguinate in seconds. We won't be able to stop it. What are his chances? Garrett's voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air. Dr. Sinclair exchanged a long look with Dr. Whitmore. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind of wordless consultation that comes from years of working in fields where percentages mean life or death. 30%, Dr. Sinclair finally said. Maybe 35 if everything goes perfectly. The fragment's location is about as bad as it gets. The surgery will be complex, lasting several hours. His body is already compromised from the organ stress. The anesthesia alone carries significant risk in his current state. And if we don't operate, 6 hours, maybe 8 if we're fortunate, the fluid will continue accumulating. Eventually his heart will stop from the pressure. It should be relatively peaceful, but it will be fatal. 35% versus 0. Those odds had never sounded good before, would never sound good in any reasonable assessment. But compared to the absolute certainty of death, they felt like a lifeline thrown across an abyss. Garrett looked at Remy. The dog's eyes had opened again, though just barely, watching him with that unwavering trust that had defined their entire relationship. Trust that Garrett would make the right choice. Trust that had never faltered, not once in 8 years, through fire and bullets, and all the darkness in between. The memory of that October night came flooding back with brutal, crystalline clarity. October 15th, 2024. The call had come in at 11:47 p.m. Garrett remembered the exact time because he'd been filling out end-of-shift paperwork when the radio crackled to life. Anonymous tip about a gun-running operation working out of Warehouse 7 at the Port of Portland. A TF was en route but 40 minutes out. Local PD requested to secure the perimeter and await federal backup. Garrett and Remy had been finishing a quiet shift. Routine patrol, nothing eventful. Captain Thornton had asked for volunteers to respond. Garrett's hand had gone up before the captain finished speaking. Could be nothing, Thornton had warned. Could be everything. You don't have to. We'll go, Garrett had said. Remy was already at the door, vest on, tail up, ready. Always ready. They'd arrived at the docks at 12:15 a.m. 3 other units were already positioned around the perimeter. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, a dark, massive silhouette against the slightly less dark backdrop of clouds. Rain had started falling around midnight light, at first, then progressively heavier. The kind of Pacific Northwest rain that soaked through everything and made the world feel closed and compressed. Officer Jennings had approached through the downpour rain dripping steadily off the brim of his cap. We've got eyes on 3 suspects inside through the high windows. They're moving crates, looks like loading a van. A TF says, hold position and wait. But if they try to run before backup arrives, we stop them, Garrett had finished. Standard protocol, contain and apprehend if necessary. They'd split up to cover the warehouse's multiple exits. 2 teams on the north and south loading bays. Garrett and Remy took the east entrance, the smaller personnel door that faced the river. The rain was coming down in sheets, now heavy enough that visibility dropped to maybe 15 or 20 feet. Remy had ranged ahead as they approached, nose down despite the rain. His training was exceptional. He could track in any weather, any conditions. Garrett had followed, weapon drawn, every sense heightened to combat-ready alertness. The warehouse interior was a labyrinth of shipping containers and industrial equipment, massive shadows everywhere. The sound of rain on the metal roofing created a constant drumming, white noise that masked footsteps, breathing movement. Garrett had to rely almost entirely on Remy's superior senses. They'd penetrated maybe 50 feet inside when Remy stopped dead. Every muscle in his body went rigid in that way that meant threat detected. His hackles rose along his spine. A low growl started deep in his chest, barely audible beneath the rain noise. Garrett raised his weapon, scanning the darkness with his flashlight. Police, show yourself, hands where I can see them. Movement erupted to their right. 2 figures burst from behind a stack of containers. One peeled left, sprinting toward what Garrett had assumed was the south exit. The other went right, heading deeper into the warehouse toward the riverside. Suspect running east, Garrett had shouted into his radio, then committed to pursuing the eastbound runner. Trust the other teams to handle their sectors. Remy was faster. The dog cut across the warehouse floor with the kind of speed that still amazed Garrett even after years of partnership. Paws finding purchase on wet concrete that would have sent a human sliding. Closing the distance with predatory efficiency, the suspect saw Remy coming. Skidded to a desperate stop, threw his hands up in surrender. Don't shoot. Don't let the dog. I'm not armed. Garrett closed the distance, weapon trained, center mass. On the ground, face down, hands behind your head. Now. The man complied, dropping hard to the concrete, spreading his arms wide. I'm unarmed. I swear I'm unarmed. Garrett was 3 steps away from beginning the pat-down when the shot rang out. The sound was unmistakable, even through the rain and metal roof acoustics. A .45 caliber handgun. Heavy, authoritative, loud enough to echo across the entire dock complex. The muzzle flash had come from somewhere elevated. The catwalk system, maybe, or the top of one of the stacked containers. Garrett had spun immediately, training taking over, trying to locate the shooter, heart hammering, adrenaline spiking. The suspect on the ground was shouting something. Other officers were yelling through the radio, chaos erupting in real time. And in the middle of all that chaos, Remy had yelped, a sharp, startled sound. Then he'd shaken his head violently, ears flapping like he was trying to clear water from them after swimming. Remy heel. The dog had trotted back, immediately falling into position at Garrett's left side. Together, they'd secured the suspect, cuffed him, waited for backup that arrived within 90 seconds. The sweep that followed had been thorough. They'd found the second runner hiding in a storage locker, discovered the third suspect had somehow escaped out a window before law enforcement even arrived. The weapons haul had been significant: 23 illegal firearms, ammunition, body armor, significant arrests, clean operation, successful night, commendations all around. Back at the station, Garrett had taken Remy into the kennel area for their standard post-operation check. He'd run his hands over every inch of the dog's body, methodical and thorough, looking for blood, for wounds, for any sign of injury or distress. Remy had stood patiently through the examination, tail wagging slightly. When Garrett's fingers had pressed along his rib cage, the dog had tensed, just barely, just for a moment, a small reaction that Garrett had noted but not worried about. He'd pressed again, gentler, watching Remy's face for pain responses. The dog had turned his head and licked Garrett's cheek. Affectionate, normal, fine. Just sore from all that running and the adrenaline, huh, boy? There had been no blood, no visible wound. German Shepherds had thick double coats, especially in the fall and winter, when their undercoat filled in. Garrett had checked the fur carefully, but in the fluorescent lighting of the kennel, with Remy's dark coloring and the residual dampness from the rain, he'd seen nothing unusual. Nothing that suggested a bullet had entered his partner's body. He'd given Remy an extra treat that night, rubbed his ears the way the dog loved, told him he was a good boy, the best boy. Exceptional work as always. And Remy, with a .45 caliber fragment lodged between his ribs and pressing incrementally closer to his heart, with every heartbeat, had wagged his tail and eaten his treat and settled into his kennel and never made a single sound of complaint. For 18 months, 547 days, 13,128 hours. Every single one of those hours, that fragment had been inside him, causing pain, making every breath a little harder, making every run a little more exhausting, slowly, inexorably killing him. And for every single one of those hours, Remy had worked full duty, had run, had tracked, had taken down suspects and found missing persons and protected his handler, and done everything a K-9 officer was supposed to do. He had hidden it all, hidden the pain, hidden the weakness, hidden the fact that he was dying by degrees. Because that's what working dogs did. Because showing vulnerability meant being pulled from duty. Because duty was everything, and Garrett was everything, and protecting Garrett meant more than protecting himself. Now standing in the exam room with the X-ray image on the screen, showing the irrefutable evidence of 18 months of silent suffering, Garrett felt something crack open inside his chest. "I checked him," he said, voice rough with barely contained anguish. "That night after the operation, I checked him thoroughly and found nothing." Dr. Whitmore's expression held deep compassion. The bullet entered through his coat. German Shepherds have extremely dense fur, especially their winter coat. A small entry wound can seal itself within minutes. Without significant external bleeding, without an exit wound, it would be virtually impossible to detect, especially in poor lighting and wet conditions. "I should have seen it, should have known something was wrong, should have taken him to emergency that night just to be sure." "Garrett," Dr. Sinclair said, his tone firm, but not unkind. "Working dogs are specifically bred and intensively trained to hide pain and injury. It's an evolutionary advantage for pack animals and a direct result of their conditioning. They don't show weakness because weakness in a pack means being left behind. They don't complain because complaining achieves nothing. They push through until their bodies physically fail. This dog could have been in significant chronic discomfort for months, and you would never have known unless you were specifically looking for something, unless you had reason to suspect internal trauma." The words were meant to absolve, to comfort, to remove the burden of guilt. They didn't work, because the truth was that Garrett had failed to protect the one creature who'd protected him unconditionally for 8 years, failed to see the signs, failed to notice the gradual changes that in retrospect screamed internal injury. Captain Thornton stepped forward, his voice gravel rough. Decision time, Garrett. We need to know now. Do we operate or do we let him go peacefully? Garrett looked at Remy again, really looked at him. The dog was watching him through half-closed eyes, those brown eyes that had seen him through Amanda's death, through grief that had nearly destroyed him, through all the darkness and doubt and nights when continuing to exist felt impossible. Remy had fought for him for 8 years, had saved his life multiple times, had asked for nothing in return except food and shelter and the chance to work beside him. Now it was Garrett's turn to fight for Remy. We operate, Garrett said, his voice steady despite the terror churning in his gut. Do whatever it takes. I don't care about the odds. He deserves every chance we can give him. Dr. Sinclair nodded once, sharp and decisive. Then we move immediately. Every minute we wait, that fluid accumulates. Dr. Whitmore, prep OR2. I need a full cardiac surgical kit, portable ultrasound, cross-matched, canine blood typed, and ready minimum 2 units. Get me your best surgical nurse and your most experienced anesthesiologist. Dr. Whitmore was already in motion, phone out, making rapid calls. The room erupted into organized chaos. People appearing, equipment being wheeled in, the machinery of emergency intervention spinning up to full speed. Officer Holloway, Dr. Sinclair said, his tone gentler now. I need you to fully understand what we're about to attempt. This surgery could take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours depending on complications. There will be moments when we might lose him. His heart could stop under anesthesia. He could hemorrhage during extraction. The fragment could shift and cause catastrophic damage. His compromised system could simply give out from the stress. I will do absolutely everything in my power to bring him through this alive, but I need you prepared for the very real possibility that he might not survive the procedure. I understand, Big. Because once we induce anesthesia and make the first incision, there's no going back. We either succeed completely or we lose him trying. There's no middle ground. Garrett placed his hand on Remy's head one more time. The dog's tail moved slightly, just the tip, just enough. A small gesture of trust and acknowledgement. He's a fighter, Garrett said. He's been fighting for 18 months with a bullet in his chest without anyone knowing. He won't quit now, not when he knows we're trying to help him. All right then, Dr. Sinclair checked his watch. We go in 15 minutes. Say whatever you need to say to him now. The room emptied gradually. Captain Thornton clasped Garrett's shoulder once hard enough to hurt, then left without words. Officer Dalton followed, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. The door closed with a soft click that sounded remarkably final. Garrett was alone with Remy. He leaned down until his forehead rested against the dog's, careful not to cause additional pain. Listen to me, buddy. You're going into surgery now. It's going to be hard. Harder than anything you've faced before. It's going to hurt, and you're going to want to give up. But you've done hard things before. You've survived impossible things. Remy's breathing rattled in his chest, in and out, labored but present, still fighting. That fire at the chemical plant, you survived that. Those burns on your paws that should have ended your career. You came back from that. The fall from that container, the pipe that cracked your ribs, you pushed through all of it. You survived 18 months with a bullet fragment migrating toward your heart without complaining once. You're the toughest, bravest dog I've ever known. Garrett's voice cracked. He pushed through the emotion, forced the words out. I need you to fight one more time. Fight like you fought when you pulled me out of that burning building. Fight like you fought when you tracked down Lily McCormick through impossible conditions. Fight like you've been fighting every single day for the last year and a half without me even knowing. And when it gets hard, when you're under anesthesia and your body wants to quit, I need you to remember something. He gripped Remy's face gently, making sure the dog could see him, could hear him, could understand. I need you, Remy. I still need you. You saved me once at that shelter when I was ready to give up on everything. You saved me from the fire. You saved me from grief. You saved me from myself. You gave me a reason to wake up every morning when I didn't have one. You gave me purpose when I thought mine was gone forever. So I'm asking you now one more time, please don't give up. Fight. Come back to me. Come back because I'm not done needing you yet. He pressed a kiss to the top of Remy's head, feeling the warmth of living fur beneath his lips, trying to memorize the sensation in case this was the last time. The dog's tail thumped once against the steel table. A promise, perhaps, or maybe just acknowledgement. Either way, it had to be enough. The door opened. Dr. Whitmore and two veterinary technicians entered with a specialized gurney designed for larger animals. "We're ready," she said softly, her eyes understanding. They transferred Remy with practiced efficiency and remarkable gentleness, started an IV catheter in his front leg, placed monitoring leads on his chest and legs, drew blood for the final preoperative panel. Remy's eyes never left Garrett's face through all of it, tracking his every movement. "You can walk with us to the surgical suite entrance," Dr. Whitmore said. Garrett followed the gurney down the hallway. Fluorescent lights passed overhead in steady rhythm. Other staff members stopped what they were doing to watch. Some whispered to each other. Some just stared with expressions of sympathy and hope. Word had spread through the clinic. Everyone knew what was happening. Everyone understood what was at stake. At the double doors marked surgery, authorized personnel only, they stopped. Dr. Sinclair appeared already changed into surgical scrubs, a cap covering his silver hair. His eyes were serious, but held something else. Determination, maybe. Or the focused intensity of a surgeon preparing for battle. "This is as far as you can go," he said. "There's a family waiting room down the hall to the left third door. I'll send updates when I can, but I need to focus completely on the surgery. It could be many hours before you hear anything definitive." Garrett nodded, not trusting his voice. He leaned over the gurney one final time. "I'll be right here when you wake up. That's a promise, right here waiting." Remy's eyes held his for a long-waited moment. Then the door swung open with a pneumatic hiss, and they wheeled him through into the bright surgical corridor beyond. The doors closed. Garrett stood in the empty hallway, staring at those closed doors, feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt in his entire life. He'd faced armed suspects. He'd run into burning buildings. He'd made life-or-death decisions in split-second intervals. But standing here on this side of those surgical doors, unable to do anything except wait and hope and pray, was a different kind of hell entirely. The waiting room was exactly what he expected. Small, institutional, designed for people enduring the worst hours of their lives. Uncomfortable chairs lined the walls. A coffee machine gurgled and hissed in the corner, producing something that smelled vaguely like coffee, but probably tasted like regret. A television mounted high on the wall played the news with the sound mercifully off. Garrett sat in a chair that faced the hallway. From this position, he could see the surgical wing doors, could watch for any sign of movement, any indication of news, good or bad. Captain Thornton arrived 30 minutes later carrying 2 large coffees from the decent place 3 blocks away. He handed one to Garrett without speaking, then sat down 2 chairs over. The silence between them was comfortable, born from years of working together, understanding that sometimes presence mattered more than words. Officer Dalton showed up an hour after that carrying a bag from the deli that made good sandwiches. He set it on the small table without comment. No one touched the food. It sat there like an accusation, a reminder that life continued even when it felt like it shouldn't. Time moved strangely in that waiting room. Sometimes minutes felt like hours, each second stretching into eternity. Sometimes whole hours seemed to pass in what felt like heartbeats. Garrett's phone buzzed periodically with texts from other officers, checking in, offering support, asking for updates. He didn't respond to any of them. Couldn't find the words. Couldn't spare the emotional energy. At the 2-hour mark, Dr. Whitmore emerged briefly from the surgical wing. Her scrubs showed evidence of hard work darkened with sweat and other fluids. Her face was pale but focused. "He's stable," she said without preamble. Dr. Sinclair has successfully located and isolated the fragment. The extraction is extremely delicate, but we're making steady progress. His vitals are holding. She disappeared back through the doors before Garrett could formulate questions back to the battle still raging in that operating room. Captain Thornton shifted in his seat. He's going to make it, the captain said. Not a question, not hope. A statement of absolute fact delivered with the kind of certainty that came from refusing to accept any other outcome. Garrett wanted desperately to believe him. At hour 3, Garrett's exhausted mind began cataloging every moment from the last 18 months that he'd missed. Every sign he should have caught, every symptom he'd rationalized away. December 2024. Just 2 months after the shooting, Remy had hesitated before jumping into the patrol car, not refusing, just pausing, gathering himself before making the leap. Garrett had attributed it to cold weather. Older dogs got stiff when temperatures dropped. Perfectly normal. February 2025. Remy had been noticeably slower on their morning runs. Garrett had adjusted their routine, immediately cutting back the distance, assuming he was just being considerate of an aging dog approaching his senior years. April 2025. Remy had started sleeping exclusively on his right side, never on his left anymore. Garrett had noticed but assumed it was simply preference, the way people develop favorite sleeping positions. June 2025. Remy's appetite had decreased, not dramatically, not enough to cause alarm, but noticeably. Garrett had switched food brands, thinking the old kibble had maybe gone stale, or the formula had changed. August 2025, Remy had refused to climb the stairs at the station, had waited at the bottom until Garrett came back down. Garrett had joked about the dog getting lazy in his old age, had laughed it off. October 2025. Exactly 1 year after the shooting, Remy had started breathing heavier after minimal exertion. Garrett had finally scheduled a vet appointment. The vet had listened to his heart with a stethoscope, run basic blood work, found nothing obviously alarming in the standard panels. He's getting older, the vet had said with a reassuring smile. Perfectly normal for an 8-year-old working dog to slow down a bit. Nothing to worry about. January 2026. Remy had stopped playing with his favorite toy, a rubber Kong he'd carried around since puppyhood. Just lost all interest. Garrett had bought new toys, different textures and sounds, trying to recapture that playfulness. None of them had worked. March 2026, just 3 weeks ago. Remy had started refusing treats. Not food, but the special training treats he'd always loved. Garrett had brought it up at Remy's regular checkup. Dr. Whitmore had examined him thoroughly, found nothing obvious on physical exam. She'd suggested possible dental issues, scheduled a cleaning for the following month. A cleaning that would never happen because by the following month, Remy was dying from a wound no one had known existed. Every sign had been there. Every symptom, every behavioral change. A perfect constellation of evidence pointing toward internal trauma, and Garrett had explained every single piece away, rationalized it, normalized it, missed it. Stop it, Captain Thornton said quietly, breaking the hours-long silence. Garrett looked up. What? I can see it on your face. You're running through everything you think you should have caught. Every sign you believe you missed. Stop torturing yourself. This isn't your fault. He had a bullet fragment in his chest for 18 months and I never knew. How is that not my fault? Because he didn't want you to know. Thornton leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fixing Garrett with an intense stare. I've worked with K-9 units for 23 years. You know what I've learned in all that time? They protect us from more than just physical threats. They protect us from worry, from fear, from guilt, from anything that might hurt us, including knowledge of their own pain and suffering. Remy knew he was injured, but he also knew that if you knew you'd pull him from active duty immediately, you'd worry yourself sick, you'd blame yourself. So he hid it. That's what they do. That's what makes them so incredibly extraordinary and so absolutely heartbreaking. Officer Dalton nodded slowly. Captain's right. I worked a tracking operation with Remy just last month. Forest Park, that missing teenager case. He was definitely slower than usual, yeah, but he found that kid in under an hour when we'd been searching for 6. He was still doing it his job, still serving, still protecting, because that's who he is at his core. The words should have helped, should have eased the crushing weight of guilt. They didn't, because the fundamental truth remained that Garrett had failed to protect the one creature who'd protected him unconditionally for 8 years. At hour 4, everything changed. The surgical doors burst open with sudden violence. Dr. Whitmore rushed out, moving fast, her face urgent and focused. She didn't stop to provide updates, didn't even glance at the waiting room, just ran toward the pharmacy section with the kind of speed that communicated emergency. Garrett was on his feet instantly. "What's happening?" She didn't answer, disappeared around the corner, returned less than 2 minutes later carrying a blood bag and what looked like emergency medications. Vanished back through the surgical doors without a word. Garrett moved toward the doors. Captain Thornton caught his arm. "You can't go in there. You'll contaminate the sterile field and put him at greater risk." Something's wrong. Something's going badly wrong. An alarm started sounding, muffled by the surgical doors but unmistakable in its urgency. The high-pitched continuous screech of a cardiac monitor detecting flatline. Garrett stopped breathing. Through the small, reinforced window in the surgical door, he could see movement. Rapid, frantic, controlled chaos. Dr. Sinclair's hands moving with desperate speed. Dr. Whitmore hooking up the fresh blood bag with shaking fingers. A nurse performing chest compressions on the small body on the operating table. The flatline alarm continued. A steady, soul-destroying tone that meant no heartbeat, no life. Death happening in real time. "No," Garrett whispered. The word came out broken, barely audible. "No, no, no." Time fractured. Seconds became hours, became eternities. The alarm kept screaming its single note of catastrophe. Garrett's vision tunneled the edges, going dark, his entire world narrowing to that small window and the desperate scene playing out beyond it. Captain Thornton was saying something. His mouth was moving. Words were forming, but they sounded like they were coming from underwater, distorted and meaningless. Remy was dying. Right now on that table behind those doors, after 4 hours of surgery, after all the hope and fear and desperate bargaining, Remy's heart had stopped beating. And there was nothing Garrett could do except stand in a hallway and watch through a window as the best thing in his life slipped away into darkness. The compressions continued. Dr. Sinclair's hands pressed down rhythmically on Remy's chest, forcing blood through a cardiovascular system that had given up. 1 minute, 2. Garrett found himself counting each compression, unable to look away, unable to accept what he was witnessing. 3 minutes, 4. Too long. Garrett knew it was too long, had read the statistics, knew the facts. After 4 minutes without oxygen, brain damage began. After 5 minutes, it was usually irreversible. After 6 minutes, survival was nearly impossible. He watched the clock on the hallway wall. The second hand swept around once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 full minutes of flatline. Dr. Sinclair was still performing compressions, still fighting. But even through the window, even from this distance, Garrett could see the resignation beginning to creep into the doctor's posture. The subtle sagging of shoulders. The acceptance that sometimes, despite all the skill and all the effort and all the desperate hope, you lose. 6 minutes. Garrett's knees buckled. Captain Thornton caught him, held him upright, but Garrett barely registered the support. "He's gone," Garrett heard himself say. The words tasted like ash and endings. "He's gone." But Dr. Sinclair wasn't stopping. His hands kept moving. Rhythmic compressions, forcing circulation through a heart that refused to beat on its own. Dr. Whitmore had her hands on Remy's chest too, now working in coordination, 2 experienced veterinarians refusing to accept defeat. 7 minutes. Then so suddenly it seemed impossible, so unexpected it felt like hallucination, the flatline changed. A single beep, sharp, clear, distinct. Then another, then a rhythm, weak, irregular, stuttering but unmistakably a rhythm. Dr. Sinclair stopped compressions, stepped back, stared at the monitor. The cardiac trace showed a heartbeat, fragile, barely there, but beating. Through the window, Garrett saw Dr. Sinclair's shoulders sag, but this time from relief rather than resignation. Saw him brace himself against the surgical table, head bowed. Dr. Whitmore was checking monitors, adjusting IV lines, moving with renewed purpose. The surgical doors opened. Dr. Whitmore stepped out. Her scrubs were soaked with sweat and darker fluids. Her face was pale drained, but her eyes held something new, something that looked like cautious triumph. "He came back," she said simply, her voice rough with emotion and exhaustion. His heart stopped for 6.5 minutes. We performed continuous CPR-administered emergency cardiac medications, and then he just came back. Dr. Sinclair has never seen anything quite like it in 40 years of veterinary surgery. Garrett couldn't form words, could only stare at her, trying to process the impossible things she just described. "The fragment is out," Dr. Whitmore continued, speaking slowly, making sure he understood each word. "We successfully extracted all three pieces. There was more shrapnel than we initially saw on X-ray. We've repaired the pericardial damage where the fragment had abraded the membrane, drained all the accumulated fluid. His heart rhythm is stabilizing, though still irregular. He's not out of danger, not by a very long measure, but he's alive. He's fighting, and right now, at this moment, that's everything." She gave Garrett a small, exhausted smile that held more warmth than anything had in hours. "Your dog is one hell of a fighter, Officer Holloway. Most animals wouldn't have survived what he just went through. The anesthesia risk alone in his condition. The cardiac arrest, 6.5 minutes without a pulse. But he did. He actually did it." Then she turned and went back through the doors, back to Remy, back to the battle that, while no longer quite as desperate, was still very much ongoing. Garrett sank into a chair. His hands were shaking. His entire body was shaking with the aftershock of adrenaline and terror and relief so profound it felt physical. "Told you he'd make it," Captain Thornton said, but his voice was rough, thick, with emotion he was trying and failing to hide. Officer Dalton had his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs of relief and release. The surgery continued for another hour and 47 minutes. But the worst had passed. The moment of greatest peril had come and gone. Remy had died on that operating table and made the choice to come back. Had fought his way back from the edge of absolute nothing, because somewhere in whatever consciousness remains under anesthesia, in whatever mysterious place dogs go when they dream he knew, someone was waiting for him. Someone needed him to come back. At 6:07 in the evening, 8 hours and 12 minutes after surgery began, Dr. Marcus Sinclair emerged from the operating room for the final time. His surgical mask hung loose around his neck. Deep fatigue lined every part of his face. His scrubs were marked with the evidence of the longest, most challenging surgery of a long and distinguished career. But his eyes held something that made Garrett's heart leap. Quiet triumph. Garrett was on his feet before the doctor fully cleared the doorway, moving on instinct and desperate hope. "He made it through," Dr. Sinclair said. 3 simple words that carried the weight of miracles and second chances. "The fragment is completely removed. All pieces. We've successfully repaired the pericardial tear, drained all accumulated fluid from around his heart. His cardiac rhythm has stabilized to an acceptable pattern. He's in recovery now, still under deep anesthesia, but all vital signs are holding steady." The hallway seemed to tilt and spin. Garrett reached out, steadied himself against the wall, trying to process words that felt too good to be real. "Can I see him?" "Soon. We're getting him settled in intensive care. He's still intubated, still on significant medical support, but he should start waking up within the next hour or two." Dr. Sinclair paused, and his expression shifted to something more serious. "Garrett, I need you to understand what the next 72 hours look like. The surgery was successful, yes, but Remy's body has been through extraordinary trauma. Infection is a very significant risk given the length of surgery and the contaminated nature of the original wound. His sutures could fail. His heart could develop dangerous arrhythmias as it recovers from the arrest. The next 3 days are absolutely critical. If he makes it through them without major complications, his chances improve dramatically. But right now, right at this moment, we're not remotely out of danger." But he has a chance, a real chance. He has a real chance, Dr. Sinclair confirmed, and something in his voice suggested he genuinely believed it. That dog's will to survive is something I've encountered very rarely in 4 decades of practice. He flatlined for 6.5 minutes and came back on his own. That's not entirely medical science. That's not entirely the medications we gave him. That's pure stubborn determination to keep living. Dr. Whitmore appeared behind Dr. Sinclair, still in her surgical scrubs, still showing the exhaustion of the longest day. You can come back now, recovery room 2, but Garrett, he's going to look rough. Don't let that scare you. Garrett followed her down a different corridor. Softer lighting here, quieter. The recovery wing had a different quality than the surgical area. The smell of antiseptic mixed with something else. Something that, against all odds, felt like hope taking physical form. She pushed open a door marked RR2 with careful gentleness. Inside the room was small and precisely climate-controlled. Medical equipment lined one wall in careful arrangement. A large padded mat occupied the center of the floor, raised slightly for easy access. And on that mat, surrounded by monitors and IV lines and all the machinery of intensive care, lay Remington. Garrett's breath caught hard in his chest. Remy looked impossibly small in a way Garrett had never associated with his partner. The thick bandages wrapped around his entire chest made him seem fragile, vulnerable. An oxygen line ran to his nose. 3 separate IV lines fed into catheters on both front legs. The cardiac monitor beeped steadily, showing a rhythm that was still irregular but strengthening with each passing minute. A breathing tube remained in place, connected to a ventilator that hissed softly with mechanical regularity. His eyes were closed, the anesthesia still holding him in its grip. "He's breathing mostly on his own," Dr. Whitmore said softly, reading Garrett's expression. "The ventilator is just support, making it easier. We'll wean him off it as he wakes up. That's a very good sign. It means his lungs are strong, his respiratory drive is intact." She walked him through the various monitors and lines: heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, temperature, each one showing numbers that she assured him were acceptable, even good given the circumstances. The anesthesia will wear off gradually over the next hour or two. He might be confused when he first wakes, disoriented, in pain despite all the medication we're giving him. Just talk to him. Let him know you were here. Let him hear your voice. That's the most important thing right now. She left then, closing the door behind her with that same gentle care, giving them privacy for whatever came next. Garrett approached slowly, as if sudden movement might somehow shatter this fragile moment they'd fought so hard to reach. He lowered himself to the floor beside the mat, careful not to jostle any of the equipment, careful not to disturb anything. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice breaking on both words. "I'm here, just like I promised. Right here." Remy didn't stir. His sides rose and fell with mechanical precision, assisted by the ventilator. The surgical site beneath all those bandages represented hours of delicate work of Dr. Sinclair's skilled hands, carefully extracting metal from tissue, of sutures holding together what had been torn and damaged. Garrett reached out and placed his hand on Remy's head, avoiding all the IV lines and monitoring leads. The fur felt warm, real, impossibly miraculously alive. "You did it," Garrett murmured, tears flowing freely now. "You fought like absolute hell and you won. You died and came back. 6.5 minutes. They said it was impossible, but you did it anyway. Just like I knew you would. Just like you always do." The minutes passed in weighted silence. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, phone rang once and was quickly answered. Normal sounds of a veterinary hospital transitioning into evening shift. At 6:43 p.m., Remy's ear twitched. Garrett's hand stilled immediately. "Remy." Another twitch, subtle but unmistakable. Then Remy's right front paw shifted slightly against the mat, moving independently for the first time since surgery. "That's it, boy. Come on back to me." Remy's breathing changed. The mechanical regularity altered into something more natural, more variable. His eyes moved beneath closed lids, rapid eye movement, suggesting he was fighting toward consciousness through layers of anesthesia and trauma. At 6:51 p.m., those eyes opened, just slits at first, narrow gaps showing dilated pupils and unfocused gaze. The pupils were massive from the drugs, making his brown eyes look almost black in the dim lighting. "I'm right here," Garrett said, keeping his voice low and steady and calm. "You're okay. Surgery's over. You made it through. You're in recovery now." Remy blinked slowly, laboriously. His eyes tracked across the room, without comprehension, taking in unfamiliar surroundings, strange equipment lights he didn't recognize, confusion written clearly in every small movement. Then his gaze found Garrett's face and stopped moving. Recognition flickered, weak, distant, struggling through the fog of medications, but unmistakably there. Garrett felt his throat close completely. "Yeah, buddy, it's me. I told you I'd be here when you woke up. I'm always going to be here." Remy's tail shifted against the mat. Not a wag, not even close to that level of energy. Just the smallest movement of the very tip. But it was enough to break Garrett completely. "Welcome back," Garrett whispered through tears he didn't bother hiding. "Welcome back, you stubborn, brave, incredible dog." Remy's eyes drifted closed again almost immediately. Sleep or unconsciousness, the line between them blurred beyond distinction. But the dog's breathing remained steady without the ventilator's full support. His heart rate held stable. The monitor showed numbers that Dr. Whitmore had called good. Dr. Whitmore checked on them every 30 minutes through that long first night. Each time she examined Remy's vitals with careful attention, adjusted medication dosages, made detailed notes on his chart. Each time her expression grew fractionally less concerned. "His body is responding well to the antibiotics," she reported during the midnight check, reading numbers off monitors. "Temperature is elevated at 101.3, but not dangerously so. We expect some fever as his immune system responds to the surgical trauma. Blood pressure is stabilizing nicely. Heart rhythm is still irregular, but improving steadily." She adjusted one of the IV drips, watched the fluid level for a moment. "If he makes it through tonight without complications, I'll feel significantly better about his overall prognosis." Garrett didn't leave. Couldn't leave. He sat on the cold floor beside Remy's mat through the entire night, one hand always maintaining contact with the dog. Captain Thornton and Officer Dalton had finally gone home around 8 p.m. after making Garrett promise to call immediately if anything changed. The clinic had grown quiet around him, just the hum of equipment and the occasional footsteps of night staff making rounds in distant hallways. At 2:17 a.m., Remy woke again. This time his eyes were clearer, more focused, tracking with better precision. He looked directly at Garrett and made a soft sound. Not quite a whine, more like simple acknowledgement of presence. "Hey there," Garrett said gently. "How are you feeling?" Remy's nose twitched, scenting the air. His tongue came out just the tip, then retreated. Thirsty, almost certainly. Garrett looked around, found a small water dish the night staff had left within reach. He held it close to Remy's mouth. "Just a little bit," Dr. Whitmore said, "small amounts only." Remy lapped weakly at the water. 3 small, careful drinks, then his head settled back onto the mat with visible exhaustion. But his eyes stayed on Garrett's face, holding contact, communicating something wordless but profound. "I know it hurts," Garrett said quietly. "I know you're confused about where you are and what happened and why everything feels wrong. But you're going to be okay. You hear me? You're going to recover from this, and then you're completely done. No more missions, no more danger, no more getting hurt protecting other people. You've earned your rest. You've earned peace." Remy's eyes drifted closed again, but not before Garrett saw something in them that cut straight through his heart. Trust. Despite the pain, despite the fear, despite the tubes and bandages and strange smells, Remy still trusted him completely and unconditionally. That trust felt like both an incredible gift and a terrible responsibility. The night crawled toward dawn with glacial slowness. Garrett dozed occasionally, head resting against the wall, but never deeply enough to be called real sleep. Every change in the monitor's beeping pattern brought him instantly alert. Every sound from Remy, every shift of position, every alteration in breathing demanded his immediate attention. At 5:30 a.m., as the first gray light of morning began seeping through the windows, Dr. Whitmore entered with Dr. Sinclair for morning rounds. "How's our patient doing?" Dr. Sinclair asked, moving immediately to Remy's side with professional efficiency. "He's been awake twice. Drank some water both times, seems aware of his surroundings." Dr. Sinclair knelt beside Remy and began a systematic examination, checking the bandages for any sign of bleeding or discharge, listening to heart and lungs with his stethoscope face concentrated, palpating gently around the surgical site, watching for pain responses. Remy flinched at certain touches, but didn't cry out. "Heart sounds significantly stronger than last night," Dr. Sinclair announced after several minutes of careful assessment. "Lungs are clear, no evidence of fluid reaccumulation around the heart. Temperature is 99.8 degrees, still elevated, but coming down nicely." He looked at Garrett with something approaching satisfaction. He made it through the first night. That's the first major hurdle cleared. Now we watch vigilantly for infection and ensure those sutures hold under the stress of breathing and movement. When can he go home? The question came out more desperate than Garrett intended. Dr. Sinclair considered carefully before answering. "If everything continues improving at this rate, 10 to 15 days minimum. 2 weeks would be safer. But Garrett, you need to understand what his homecoming will look like. When he does go home, he's going to require round-the-clock intensive care for at least a full month, possibly longer. Strict medication schedules every 4 to 6 hours, extensive wound management twice daily, severely restricted activity, absolutely no running, no jumping, minimal stairs, no rough play. This is going to be a very long, very demanding recovery process. I'll take leave from work, however long it takes, whatever he needs." Dr. Sinclair nodded with approval. "Good. He's going to need you more than he's ever needed anyone." The first 2 days in recovery felt like walking an endless tightrope stretched over an abyss with no safety net. Remy developed a serious fever on day one post-operative. His temperature spiked to 102.4 degrees by afternoon. Dr. Whitmore increased antibiotic dosages, applied cooling packs, strategically monitored him hourly with meticulous attention. The fever broke after 14 brutal hours, leaving Remy completely exhausted but stable. He refused to eat. Not the special high-protein recovery food they offered. Not the treats Garrett tried to tempt him with. Not even the chicken broth that had always been irresistible. His body was too traumatized, too focused on basic survival to spare energy for digestion. By day 2 evening, Garrett could see Remy visibly weakening. The dog slept almost constantly, rousing only briefly when directly stimulated. When awake, he seemed distant, disconnected, as if some essential spark that made Remy himself had dimmed to barely flickering embers. "This is completely normal," Dr. Whitmore assured him, though her own expression carried concern. "His body is using literally every available resource just to heal. The protein from his own muscle tissue, the fat reserves he has left. Everything is being channeled into recovery. He'll come back to himself. You have to give him time." But time felt like an enemy when every hour brought new fears about infection, about suture failure, about the dozens of ways recovery could go catastrophically wrong. On the second night at exactly 11:47 p.m., the monitor started screaming. Garrett jerked awake from exhausted half-sleep. The cardiac monitor showed erratic, dangerous spikes. Remy's body convulsed on the mat. Not a seizure, something different, something worse. Dr. Whitmore burst through the door at a dead run. Dr. Sinclair immediately behind her, both moving with the controlled urgency of emergency response. "Internal bleeding," Dr. Sinclair announced immediately after a 10-second assessment, his hands already examining Remy. "One of the deep sutures has failed. We need to get him back to surgery immediately. Right now." "No," Garrett breathed, the word coming out broken. "No, he can't survive going through that again. If we don't operate within the next 30 minutes, he'll bleed out." Dr. Sinclair's voice was firm but not unkind, delivering impossible truth. I know this is terrible. I know he's already been through more than any animal should endure. But this is survivable if we act immediately. If we wait, if we hesitate, he dies. They were already moving even as he spoke, disconnecting monitors with practiced speed, preparing Remy for emergency transport. The dog's eyes found Garrett's through the chaos, confused, frightened, in obvious pain, trusting despite everything. Garrett gripped Remy's paw, carefully mindful of the IV line. You can do this, buddy. One more time. Just one more fight. I know it's not fair. I know you shouldn't have to, but you can do it. You're strong enough. They wheeled Remy away again. The surgical doors swung closed again, and Garrett was left standing in an empty hallway again, wondering if he'd made the right choice, wondering if he was being kind or cruel, forcing Remy to endure this much suffering, just because Garrett couldn't bear the thought of letting him go. Captain Thornton arrived 23 minutes later, summoned by Garrett's brief, devastated text message. Just one word here. The captain sat down beside him without speaking, said nothing at all, just sat there in solidarity and support while they waited together to see if Remy would survive a second major surgery in less than 48 hours. The operation was mercifully shorter this time, 94 minutes. Dr. Sinclair emerged looking grim, but not defeated exhaustion, written in every line of his body. We found the bleeder, small arterial branch we missed during the initial surgery, hidden behind scar tissue from the original bullet wound. It's repaired now, triple sutured. We reinforced all the other deep sutures while we were back in there. He should be stable now. But Garrett, he paused, choosing words with obvious care. His body truly cannot take much more trauma. If something else fails, if another complication develops, I don't know if he'll survive a third intervention. We may be approaching the limits of what medicine can do. I understand. Because at some point, we have to ask ourselves a very difficult question. Are we doing this for him, or are we doing this for us? Are we fighting to give him more life, or are we just prolonging suffering because we can't accept the alternative? The question hung in the air between them, like smoke that wouldn't dissipate. Garrett had no answer. No good answer. Maybe no answer at all. Remy survived the second surgery. Woke up 4 hours later, weaker than before, but undeniably alive. The fever returned with a vengeance, peaked at 103.1 degrees, finally broke after 2 full days of aggressive treatment that left everyone exhausted. On day 5, post-initial surgery, something changed. Garrett woke in the recovery room to an unfamiliar sound. He opened his eyes, disoriented from another night of broken sleep on the floor, and found Remy drinking from his water bowl. Not weakly, not reluctantly, deliberately, with purpose and intention. Remy. The dog looked up, and his eyes were clearer than they'd been since before the surgeries. Alert, present, actually seeing rather than just looking. Dr. Whitmore came in for morning rounds 20 minutes later and stopped dead in the doorway. Remy was eating, actually eating. Small, careful bites of the recovery food, but eating nonetheless. Well, she said, unable to completely hide her smile, look who's decided to rejoin the living. Over the next 5 days, Remy's improvement accelerated in ways that seemed almost miraculous after the setbacks. The fever stayed gone completely. His appetite increased daily. He started showing genuine interest in his surroundings, tracking people walking past the door, ears perking at familiar sounds. On day 7, Dr. Sinclair helped Remy stand for the first time since the surgeries. The dog's legs shook violently with the effort. He managed maybe 3 seconds of bearing his own weight before his muscles gave out and he collapsed back onto the mat. But he'd stood, under his own power. However briefly, it was a beginning. Day 8 brought 10 seconds of standing. Day 9 brought 30. On day 10, Remy stood for a full minute, legs trembling, but holding before carefully lowering himself back down. He's ready to try walking, Dr. Sinclair announced with cautious optimism. They created a short path in the recovery room. Garrett positioned himself at one end. Dr. Sinclair steadied Remy at the other, hands ready to catch if the dog fell. The distance between them was maybe 8 feet. It might as well have been 8 miles. Okay, boy, Garrett called softly, encouragingly. Come here, you can do this. Come to me. Remy took one careful step. His front left leg buckled immediately. Dr. Sinclair caught him smoothly, kept him upright with gentle support. Easy. Take your time. There's no rush. Another step. This one held. Then another. Remy's breathing grew labored quickly, his sides heaving with exertion. Sweat dampened his fur despite the climate control. But he kept moving, one painful, determined step at a time. 7 steps, 8, 9. Remy collapsed halfway to Garrett, just dropped all 4 legs giving out simultaneously. Garrett was there instantly, gathering the dog as carefully as possible. It's okay. You did so good. So incredibly good. But Remy was already struggling to get back up, determined to finish what he'd started, refusing to quit halfway. Garrett helped him, supporting most of the weight, and together they covered the remaining 4 feet to reach the other end. When they finally arrived, Remy collapsed again, panting hard enough that Garrett worried briefly about hyperventilation, but his tail was wagging. Actually wagging for the first time since before any of this nightmare began. Dr. Whitmore wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. That damn dog is going to make me cry in front of my entire staff. Every day brought small, hard-won victories. 15 steps became 20, 20 became 30, 30 became the full length of the hallway outside the recovery room. Remy's strength returned incrementally, painfully earned through exhaustion and determination and sheer stubborn refusal to accept limitation. On day 15, Dr. Sinclair performed his final examination before discharge. He checked the healing surgical sites with careful attention, listened extensively to heart and lungs, reviewed the latest blood work panels, finally stepped back with an expression of cautious satisfaction. I think he's ready to go home. The sutures are holding beautifully, no signs of infection, no fluid reaccumulation. He's eating well, maintaining weight, moving adequately for this stage of recovery. He'll still need many more weeks of careful recuperation, but he can do that at home where he'll be more comfortable. Home. The single word sounded like salvation itself. They scheduled discharge for the following morning. Garrett spent that final night in the recovery room, sitting beside Remy, hardly believing this moment had actually arrived after everything. We're going home tomorrow, he told the dog quietly. Back to our house, your bed, your yard. No more hospitals, no more surgeries, no more pain. Just rest and recovery, and all the time in the world to heal. Remy's tail thumped against the mat, slow but steady, a promise of better days ahead. The next morning arrived bright and clear, a Saturday in early May. Perfect spring sunshine flooded through the clinic windows, making everything feel like renewal and new beginnings. Dr. Whitmore brought discharge instructions, detailed medication schedules, follow-up appointment cards. Garrett barely processed the specifics. His entire focus was on getting Remy home. They'd brought in a specialized ramp for safely loading recovering animals into vehicles. No jumping, no stairs, everything gentle and controlled and careful. Captain Thornton had brought Garrett's truck around to the clinic's side entrance, as arranged. A small crowd had gathered in the parking lot. Clinic staff who'd worked the case. A few officers from the department. Someone had leaked the story to local media and it had caught fire. The dog who'd worked 18 months with a bullet in his chest. The officer who had saved him minutes before euthanasia. The 2 surgeries. The cardiac arrest and miraculous resurrection. The impossible recovery. When the clinic doors opened and Remy walked out on his own, 4 paws moving slowly but steadily, and with obvious determination, a spontaneous round of applause broke out. Remy's ears perked at the sound. His tail lifted slightly, even weakened, even bandaged, even moving with the careful deliberation of someone still healing. He carried himself with unmistakable dignity. The ramp led up to the truck's back seat. Garrett walked beside Remy for every single step, one hand hovering near, but not touching, ready to help if needed. The dog paused at the bottom of the ramp, gathering strength and courage, then began the climb. One careful step at a time, measured and controlled. At the top, he settled onto the heavily padded bed they'd prepared, exhaling hard from the effort. "Good boy," Garrett murmured, stroking his head with infinite gentleness. "You did absolutely perfect." Dr. Whitmore appeared at the truck window. "Any problems, any concerns at all? You call me immediately, day or night. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. You call. Understand?" "Thank you," Garrett said, and the words felt desperately inadequate for everything she'd done, for not giving up on him, for fighting for him when it would have been easier to let him go. "He didn't give up on himself," she replied with a soft smile. "I just helped facilitate his stubbornness." She reached through the window, scratched gently behind Remy's ear. "Take care of your person, Remy. He needs you just as much as you need him." The drive home took 23 minutes. Garrett drove like he was transporting something infinitely precious and irreplaceable, which he absolutely was. Every bump anticipated and avoided, every turn executed with extreme care. In the back seat, Remy lay with his head up, watching familiar streets pass by through the window. When they pulled into the driveway of Garrett's house, Remy's tail started wagging properly for the first time. He knew. He understood. He was home. Getting him inside required the portable ramp again. Remy managed the transition with noticeably more confidence this time. Crossed the threshold into the house and immediately stopped nose-working overtime, reacquainting himself with every remembered scent of home. His bed was exactly where it had always been positioned, in the living room near the front window, where he could watch the street. Garrett had washed the cover until it smelled fresh, fluffed the padding until it was perfectly comfortable. Remy walked to it, slowly turned 3 careful circles, the way he always had, and lowered himself down with a long, satisfied sigh. He was home. Garrett sat on the floor beside the bed, one hand resting on Remy's side. "Welcome back, buddy. Welcome home." Remy rested his head on Garrett's leg, closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, looked genuinely peaceful. The first month home established entirely new rhythms and routines. Garrett had taken a full month's leave from the department, possibly more if needed. His days now revolved completely around Remy's care and recovery. Medication administration at 6 a.m. noon, 6 p.m. and midnight without exception. Antibiotics, pain management, anti-inflammatories. Each dose carefully measured, each dose given with food, each dose monitored it to ensure Remy kept it down. Wound care twice daily became a ritual, cleaning the surgical sites with sterile solution, checking meticulously for any signs of infection, changing bandages, applying prescribed topical medications. Remy tolerated it all with patient stoic resignation. Short walks 3 times daily, just to the end of the driveway and back at first, then gradually to the corner, slowly extending the distance as Remy's stamina improved week by week. Every walk required preparation, the special harness designed to avoid pressure on his chest, the extremely slow pace, the frequent rest stops. Garrett cooked for Remy, plain chicken and rice, ground beef and sweet potato, turkey and pumpkin, whatever would tempt his appetite and provide the protein and nutrients his body desperately needed to heal. He sat with Remy during every meal, offering encouragement with every bite. At night, Garrett slept on the floor beside Remy's bed on a camping mat, just in case Remy needed something during the night, in case something went wrong, in case the dog woke up frightened or in pain and needed to know immediately that he wasn't alone. Remy's strength returned slowly but with remarkable steadiness. By week 2, he could walk an entire block without stopping. By week 3, his appetite had returned completely to normal levels. By week 4, he was starting to show genuine flashes of his old personality. Interest in squirrels outside the window, excitement when the mail carrier arrived. That subtle alertness of a dog bred to work and protect. But the work was over. Garrett had made that decision absolutely final. Remy had given enough, had sacrificed enough. had earned his retirement 1,000 times over through 8 years of faithful service. In the second month of recovery, Garrett returned to work on extremely light duty, desk assignments exclusively, no patrol, no field work whatsoever. He arranged his schedule carefully so he was never gone more than 4 hours at a time, always home for medication times. Captain Thornton had been completely understanding. Take whatever time you need, however long it takes. The department can survive without you for a while. Remy can't. One afternoon in late June, Garrett's doorbell rang unexpectedly. He opened it to find a girl standing on his porch. 12 years old, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, nervous, hopeful smile. Behind her stood her parents. Garrett recognized them immediately. The McCormicks. "Mr. Holloway," the girl said, voice careful and practiced like she'd rehearsed this. "I'm Lily McCormick. I don't know if you remember me." "I remember," Garrett said softly, warmly. "Summer of 2021. The kidnapping. The terrified 7-year-old girl they'd found in that cabin. The man with the knife. Remy taking a pipe across the ribs to protect them both. I heard about Remy, about his surgery and everything that happened. My parents brought me because I wanted to see him, to thank him. If that's okay." Garrett stepped aside, gesturing them in. He'd like that very much. Remy was in the living room dozing peacefully in a patch of afternoon sunlight. When he heard voices, unfamiliar footsteps, his head came up immediately. His tail started wagging before he'd even identified who'd arrived, just happy to have visitors. Lily approached slowly, respectfully, then dropped to her knees beside him with the kind of reverence usually reserved for something sacred. "Hi, Remy. Do you remember me?" Remy's tail increased tempo significantly. He stretched his neck forward, sniffed her hands carefully, then her face. Recognition or just natural friendliness toward children, Garrett couldn't definitively tell. But it didn't matter at all. "You saved my life 5 years ago," Lily said quietly, tears already forming. "I was so scared in that cabin, and you found me. You kept me safe until the police came. You got hurt protecting Mr. Holloway and me." Her tears spilled over. "My mom told me you almost died. She told me you had a bullet inside you for a really long time, and nobody knew. She told me Mr. Holloway saved you just like you saved me." She wrapped her arms carefully around Amy's neck, mindful of the healing wounds. The dog leaned into the embrace tail, never stopping its steady rhythm. "Thank you," Lily whispered into his fur. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being so brave." Mrs. McCormick was crying openly. Mr. McCormick had his arm around his wife, his jaw working with barely controlled emotion. They stayed for 45 minutes. Lily told Remy about school, about her friends, about how she wanted to become a veterinarian when she grew up, specifically so she could help dogs like him. Remy listened to every word with patient attention, head resting comfortably on her lap, peaceful and content in a way Garrett hadn't seen in months. When they finally left, Lily hugged Garrett tightly too. "Thank you for saving him. He's really, really special." "Yeah," Garrett agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "He really is." July arrived with summer heat and another phone call from Captain Thornton. "The department wants to hold a retirement ceremony for Remy. Nothing huge if you don't want publicity, but the officers who served with him over the years, the other K9 units, they want to say goodbye properly and honor his service. What do you think?" Garrett looked at Remy, sprawled contentedly in front of the air conditioning vent. 3 months post-surgery, scars completely hidden beneath fur that had grown back thick and healthy. Strength mostly returned to normal levels, eyes bright and alert and full of life. When, next Saturday at the station, noon, "We'll be there." The ceremony was planned to be relatively small and intimate. It absolutely wasn't. The police department's parking lot was completely packed when they arrived. Officers from every precinct in the city, K9 handlers from across the entire state, city officials, local news crews, national news crews. Someone had shared the story widely, and it had caught fire across social media and traditional media alike. The dog who'd worked 18 months with a bullet lodged in his chest. The officer who'd saved him literally seconds before euthanasia. The two emergency surgeries. The cardiac arrest and miraculous resurrection after 6.5 minutes. The impossible beautiful recovery. Garrett hadn't particularly wanted this level of attention and exposure, but looking at the crowd, at the genuine respect and emotion on every single face, he understood. This wasn't about publicity or media coverage. This was about honoring service, honoring sacrifice, honoring the profound sacred bond between a handler and their K9 partner. They'd set up a small stage with professional care, a podium with microphone, an easel displaying Remy's official service photo taken 2 years earlier, showing him in his vest looking noble and strong and ready for anything. Captain Thornton gave the opening remarks. He detailed Remy's complete service record in careful chronology. The rescues spanning 8 years, the arrests, the lives saved through his work, the commendations and awards, the exemplary record of dedicated service. Then he called Garrett to the podium. Garrett had prepared remarks carefully, had written them out longhand, edited them multiple times, practiced delivery. But standing at that microphone, looking out at hundreds of faces, officers and civilians and media, all those carefully prepared words evaporated like morning fog. Remy saved my life, he said simply, letting truth carry the weight. Not just in the ways you'd immediately think. Yes, he pulled me from a burning building when I would have died in that fire. Yes, he protected me from armed suspects who meant me harm. But that's not primarily what I mean when I say he saved me. He paused, gathering thoughts, gathering courage for vulnerability. 8 years ago, I lost my wife Amanda to cancer. I was drowning completely in grief. I didn't want to keep going, didn't see any point in continuing, couldn't imagine a future that made sense. Then I met this dog, this scared, scarred, abandoned dog who had every reason to give up on the world entirely. And somehow, inexplicably, we saved each other. Remy sat beside him, on stage, the Medal of Valor, hanging from his collar, catching sunlight. The dog was watching the crowd with alert, interested attention, tail wagging slightly, enjoying the attention and energy. For 18 months, Remy carried a bullet fragment in his chest. Garrett continued. Every single day, it caused him pain. Every single day, it made his job harder and more difficult. And every single day, he showed up anyway. He worked, he served, he protected, he saved lives. Because that's who he is at his core. That's what he was bred to do. That's what love looks like in its purest, most selfless form. His voice cracked. He pushed through the emotion. He never complained, never slowed down until his body literally physically couldn't continue anymore. And when he was dying on that exam table, when we were literal seconds from letting him go peacefully, he fought his way back. He refused to quit. He refused to surrender. Just like he's refused to quit every single day of his entire life. He looked down at Remy. The dog looked back up at him, brown eyes steady and calm and filled with everything good. Someone asked me once what makes a truly good K9 officer. I used to say intelligence, natural drive, courage, but I was fundamentally wrong about that. What makes a good K9 officer is exactly the same thing that makes a good human being. It's showing up when showing up is hard. It's doing your duty even when that duty costs you everything. It's loving someone so completely that their pain becomes your pain, their fear becomes your fear, and their survival and well-being becomes more important than your own. The crowd was absolutely silent. Even the news cameras had stopped their mechanical movements. Remy taught me all of that. He taught me what it truly means to be loyal, to be genuinely brave, to keep fighting even when you're broken inside and can't see a way forward. And the greatest privilege of my entire life has been getting to serve beside him, getting to learn from him, getting to be loved by him. He knelt down beside Remy, unclipped the Medal of Valor from the dog's collar, and held it up for everyone to see. This medal says you're a hero, but I didn't need a ceremony or a medal to tell me that truth. I've known it for 8 full years. Thank you, Remy, for absolutely everything. For saving me in every way a person can be saved. For teaching me what matters. for never ever giving up. You've earned your rest 1,000 times over. Now enjoy it." The applause started quietly, almost tentatively, then built into something overwhelming and powerful. Standing ovation. Officers in dress blues, with tears streaming down their weathered faces. K9 handlers saluting formally. The entire crowd on their feet honoring not just Remy, but every working dog who'd ever served, ever sacrificed, ever given everything for the humans they loved. Remy's tail wagged harder, faster. He looked somewhat confused by all the noise and attention, but clearly pleased. When Garrett stood back up, Remy stood with him smoothly. They walked off that stage together, side by side. Partners, brothers, family. That evening, as the sun set and the oppressive summer heat finally broke into comfortable warmth, Garrett and Remy sat together on the back porch steps of their home. The yard stretched out before them peacefully, green grass needing mowing, oak trees providing dappled shade, a fence that badly needed repair, the ordinary beautiful landscape of an ordinary beautiful life. Remy lay with his head resting in Garrett's lap, completely relaxed. The scars on his chest were visible in the golden evening light, evidence of trauma survived, evidence of battles fought and won, evidence that sometimes even when absolutely everything seems lost, miracles still happen. "You know what your last mission really was?" Garrett said quietly, stroking Remy's ears with gentle rhythm. The dog's eyes were half closed, peaceful, content, safe. "It wasn't catching criminals. It wasn't finding missing people. It wasn't any of those things we did together for all those years in service." Remy's tail thumped once against the wooden step. "Your last mission was teaching me what truly matters in life. Teaching me that love isn't something you just say with words. It's something you do, every single day, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Even when nobody's watching or keeping score." Garrett looked up at the sky. Pink and orange clouds stretched across the horizon in breathtaking display. Stars just beginning to emerge in the darkening east. "Amanda used to tell me that dogs don't live long enough, that it wasn't fair they have to leave us so soon. But maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe they're not supposed to be here forever. Maybe they're just supposed to be here long enough to teach us how to be better, how to love better, how to live better, and then trust us to carry those lessons forward." He felt tears on his face but didn't wipe them away. Let them fall. "You taught me, Remy. You saved me from that fire, yes. But more importantly, you saved me from myself, from the grief that was eating me alive from the inside, from the loneliness that made every single day feel impossible to face. You gave me a reason to wake up every morning, a reason to keep going when I couldn't find one anywhere else, a reason to believe that maybe even after losing everything, life could still have meaning and purpose." Remy shifted slightly, pressing his head harder into Garrett's hand, a gesture of comfort. Even now, even in retirement, even after everything's still trying to take care of his person. "So thank you for choosing me that day at the shelter, for trusting me when trust was hard, for standing beside me through absolutely everything, for fighting to come back when you could have let go. Thank you for 18 months of silent suffering so I wouldn't worry. Thank you for every early morning, every late night, every single moment of loyalty that I'll never be able to fully repay." The sun touched the horizon. The world turned gold, then amber, then soft purple and blue. "We've got time now," Garrett said softly. "All the time in the world. No more missions, no more danger, no more pain. Just us. Just this. Mornings on the porch, walks in the park, lazy afternoons. All the peaceful time I should have given you before, but was too caught up in work to realize you needed." Remy's breathing was slow and even and perfectly calm. His eyes closed fully. Sleep or contentment or simply complete trust that everything was finally truly okay. "You can rest now, buddy. You've done your duty and then some. You've served with more honor than anyone could ask. You've saved more lives than anyone can count, including mine more times than I can remember. You're done fighting. You're done sacrificing. From now on, your only job is being happy and letting yourself be loved. Think you can handle that?" The tail thumped again, once. Gentle, a promise or an acknowledgement. Either way, it was more than enough. They sat together as darkness fell completely. Man and dog, officer and K9, two broken souls who'd found each other at exactly the right moment and built something that transcended words or categories or simple understanding. Above them, stars emerged one by one, constant, eternal, bearing witness to this moment that felt both monumentally important and perfectly simply ordinary. Somewhere in the neighborhood, another dog barked. Remy's ears twitched with awareness, but he didn't lift his head. Not his problem anymore. Not his responsibility. Someone else's turn to stand watch. "I love you," Garrett whispered into the gathering darkness. "More than I can possibly say. More than you'll ever fully know." Remy sighed, content, safe, home. The last embrace had saved them both. The decision to fight to hope, to refuse surrender, even when surrender seemed inevitable. Now finally they could truly rest. The world kept turning its eternal rotation. Life continued its relentless forward march. But here on a porch in suburban Portland, on a summer night that felt touched by grace itself, two survivors held on to each other and simply breathed. They had made it through the fire, through the darkness, through the impossible odds and the minutes when death seemed absolutely certain and inevitable. They had made it through together, and together they would face whatever came next, not as officer and K9, not as handler and working dog, not defined by duty or service or sacrifice, just as family, just as home, just as love.